Chapter 5. The Underworld. Persephone. One day when Hades, god of the underworld, visited the earth, Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, saw him.
"Eros,"
she said to her son,
"take your golden arrow and pierce the heart of that dark and dangerous god. Fire your arrow so that Hades will fall in love with Persephone. She is the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest. These women dislike us. Let them suffer."
Eros did as his mother demanded. He selected his sharpest golden arrow and fired it straight into the heart of Hades. Later that day, Hades saw Persephone as she was picking flowers with her friends by a lake in the valley of Enna. He immediately fell in love with her. When her friends were not watching, he picked her up in his arms and carried her off to the river Cyane, from where they entered his underworld. Persephone's friends ran to tell her mother, Demeter, that she had disappeared. Demeter searched the world for her daughter without success. Eventually, in despair, she sat down on a rock beside a road. A farmer named Celeus and his daughter were leading home their goats when they saw an old lady sitting at the roadside. It was Demeter in disguise.
"My dear lady,"
said the girl,
"why are you sitting here alone?"
"My child is missing,"
said Demeter.
"I have searched everywhere and can't find her."
As she spoke, tears fell down her cheeks.
"Come to our cottage,"
said the old man.
"Refresh yourself and rest before you continue your journey. You are welcome to share our food and lodgings until your daughter returns safely."
"Thank you,"
said Demeter.
"How can I refuse your kindness?"
When they reached Celeus's cottage, it was obvious that his wife, Metaneira, was in great distress.
"Welcome to our home,"
she said, sobbing.
"But I must first tend my small son, Triptolemus. He is very ill, and I have been told he might die."
Demeter went to the child's bedside and touched his cheek and kissed him. Instantly, his pale, sickly face became pink and healthy again. Everyone was delighted at the small boy's miraculous recovery. Apples, honey, milk, and cream were set out on the table. While they ate, Demeter mixed the juice of poppies with the boy's milk, and he fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, Demeter massaged the sleeping boy's limbs. Then she placed his small body in the ashes of the fire and whispered a spell over him. Metaneira woke up and screamed when she saw what the old woman was doing. She quickly rescued her son from the ashes. The family was astonished when Demeter assumed her heavenly form.
"I would have made your son immortal, but you stopped me,"
said Demeter.
"Nevertheless, he will teach men how to use the plow. He will show them what can be gained from cultivating the soil. He will grow up to be a good and useful man."
Demeter continued to search for her daughter. She traveled the world again before she returned to the banks of the river Cyane. This was the spot where Hades had taken her daughter down to his home in Tartarus. A river nymph who had seen the kidnapping wanted to tell Demeter what she had witnessed, but she was afraid of Hades. Instead, she dropped Persephone's apron at the goddess's feet. When she saw the apron, she was in no doubt that her daughter was dead. But she did not know how. She could only blame the innocent land surrounding her.
Ungrateful soil,
she said.
I made you fertile and covered you with herbage. I won't support you again until my daughter is returned to me.
The cattle began to die and seeds failed to grow. There was either too much sun or too much rain. Thistles and brambles grew up in the place of crops. The fountain nymph, Arethusa, saw what was happening and spoke to Demeter.
Don't blame the land,
She said,
It opened unwillingly to allow your daughter and her kidnapper to pass through. She is now married to Hades, ruler of the underworld.
When Demeter heard this, she was stunned. She hurried to Zeus and begged him to bring back her daughter. Zeus agreed to help, but he could not rescue Persephone if food or drink had passed her lips during her stay in the underworld. Zeus's son, Hermes, was sent to demand Persephone's release, but Hades told Hermes that Persephone had eaten a pomegranate. This was enough to prevent her complete release, but a compromise was made. She was to spend half her time with her mother and the rest with her husband. Demeter agreed to this arrangement and restored fertility and growth to the earth. For the 6 months of the year when Demeter and her daughter were reunited, the earth flourished. New growth sprang forth in the first 3 months, and this became known as the season of spring. The following 3 months, when the plants were in full bloom, was the summer season. But when Persephone returned to her husband's realm, the plants began to die. This became known as the fall season. For the final 3 months of Persephone's time underground, the earth was barren and nothing grew. This is the season known as winter. Orpheus. Orpheus was the son of Apollo and Calliope. His father gave him a lyre, and he learned to play. Soon he could play so well that wild beasts and trees were charmed by his music. When Orpheus grew into manhood, he married the beautiful Eurydice. Hymen, god of marriage, was called to bless Orpheus and Eurydice at their wedding, but he brought only unlucky omens with him. Soon after the marriage, the shepherd, Aristeus, saw Eurydice and desired her. She was afraid of him and fled, but in her haste she stepped on a poisonous snake. Nothing could save her, and death came quickly. Orpheus's grief was overwhelming. Unable to live without his beloved wife, he traveled to the underworld to find her. When he arrived in Tartarus, he played his lyre and sang of his love and grief to Hades and Persephone. Orpheus's tender and loving music brought tears to the eyes of Persephone. Even Hades was moved by his sorrow and agreed to his request.
You may take your wife, Orpheus,
said Hades,
but don't look back at her until you have reached the living world.
Orpheus led his wife through the dark, silent caves and tunnels up towards the earth's air. When they had nearly reached the upper world, he forgot Hades' warning and looked back to make sure Eurydice was following. Immediately her spirit was returned to the underworld.
Farewell,
she cried sadly.
a last farewell.
Then she disappeared. Orpheus tried to follow her and asked permission to have her released again. His request was denied. For 7 days he stayed near the entrance to the underworld without food or sleep, singing about his grief and sorrow. Orpheus's music melted the hearts of nearby trees and wild beasts. Other women tried to seduce him, but he rejected them. One of them shouted,
I cannot bear how he scorns us,
and threw a spear at him. It landed harmlessly at his feet. Some of the women threw stones at him, but they also fell short of their target. Orpheus continued to play his lyre and sing his mournful songs. Then the angry women seized him and tore him limb from limb. They threw his head and his lyre into the river Hebrus. Downriver, Orpheus's aunts gathered his remains and buried them at Lebethra. For a second time, Orpheus traveled to Tartarus. He found Eurydice and eagerly embraced her. Today, the river Hebrus still whispers his sad music, and the nightingale sings its sweetest songs at his grave.